Every enterprise is now asking a different question about artificial intelligence. For a while, the question was simply whether the machine could answer. Could it draft the email, summarize the document, write the code, respond to the customer? That question has been settled. The question that now sits in the boardroom is larger and it is sharper. Can the system act on behalf of the enterprise? Not advise, act. That single shift from answering to acting is what we mean by agentic AI. And it changes the nature of the decision a leadership team has to make. Good day. I am Srini. For more than 2 decades, I have worked inside large enterprises in transformation, in digital commerce, and in regulated cross-border payments, the kind of environment where a wrong action is not a typo, it is money, a customer, and a regulator. I want to talk today about agentic AI as a matter of strategy and transformation, not the technology underneath it, which will keep changing, but the leadership decisions around it, which do not. And I want to be direct with you because the most expensive mistakes in this field are not technical. They are strategic mistakes made early, dressed up as innovation. Let me start with what agentic AI actually is in plain terms. A generative system produces an output when you ask it. An agentic system pursues a goal. It can break that goal into steps, retrieve what it needs, choose and use tools, take actions across systems, check the result and adjust. The important word in that sentence is not intelligence, it is agency. For years we bought intelligence. A better forecast, a sharper recommendation, a faster answer. What is new is that the system can now carry the work itself, from intention to execution. That is not a smarter chatbot. It is a new operating layer sitting between human intention and enterprise execution. And the moment a system can act, everything an enterprise built to govern human action is suddenly in scope. So here is the first principle, and it is a strategic one. Agentic AI is not a technology initiative, it is a business decision that happens to involve technology. It touches the operating model, the cost structure, the workforce, the architecture, the vendor relationships, the risk posture, and ultimately the competitive position of the firm. Which is why the wrong opening question is, where can we install some agents? The right question is, which parts of this enterprise should become faster, more autonomous, and more capable while remaining fully accountable for what they do. Hold on to that phrase, while remaining accountable. It is the thread that runs through this entire talk. Let me turn to strategy. Most AI programs begin with use cases, and that is the first trap. A business unit asks, can we automate this? A vendor says, our tool already does that. A technology team builds a pilot. Multiply that across a large organization and you get something predictable. An agent in HR, an agent in IT support, an agent in finance, an agent for customer email, a dozen more in the corners of the business. Each one looks reasonable on its own. Together, they are duplication, inconsistent controls, unclear ownership, and a cost line that nobody can fully explain. That is activity without strategy. It is motion that looks like progress. The discipline is to stop thinking in tasks and start thinking in capabilities. A use case asks, can AI do this task? A capability asks, can AI change how this part of the business performs? Customer operations, finance operations, risk and compliance, technology delivery, the relationship with the customer. These are capabilities, and an enterprise that allocates its agentic investment to a small number of serious capabilities will outperform one that scatters 50 pilots and calls it a strategy. Once you think in capabilities, value comes into focus. In my work, I find it useful to read agentic value in 4 registers. The first is cost, the same outcome produced with less human effort. The second is speed, the same outcome produced faster. a close that finishes earlier, an onboarding that moves from days to hours. The third is consistency. The same outcome produced the same way every time, which in a regulated business is itself a form of value. And the fourth is new capability, something the enterprise simply could not do before at acceptable cost. Most leaders instinctively chase the first register, cost, because it fits on a slide. But the durable advantage usually lives in the other three. Speed changes what a customer experiences, consistency changes what a regulator sees, and new capability changes what your competitors cannot yet match. So when someone brings you an agentic proposal, the strategic question is not how much headcount does this save, it is which register of value are we actually buying, and is it one that compounds? Then comes the question every enterprise must answer for itself. Do we build, do we buy, or do we orchestrate? I deliberately say orchestrate, not partner, because it is the path most leaders underestimate. Building gives you control and costs you capacity. Buying gives you speed and costs you differentiation. Orchestrating, composing your own capability on top of models and services you do not own, is how most serious enterprises will actually operate. The decision turns on a few honest questions. Is this capability a source of competitive advantage, or is it plumbing that everyone needs and no one wins on? How sensitive is the data and the action? The difference between summarizing a policy and releasing a payment. How deep is the integration into the systems that run the business? Do we have the people not just to build an agent, but to operate it safely at scale, which is the harder thing? And can we afford it not at pilot volume, but at production volume, when the cost of the model, the cloud, the monitoring, and the human review all scale together? The discipline here is one line. Do not fund agentic AI like an innovation toy. Fund it like enterprise infrastructure, because that is what it becomes. There is a deeper strategic point underneath the sourcing decision, and it is easy to miss. In an agentic enterprise, the intelligence is largely rented. The models come from a small number of providers, and they are available to your competitors too. So the model is not your advantage. What you own is your advantage. Your architecture, your data, your context, the way your enterprise is wired, so an agent can act within it safely. The intelligence is rented. The architecture and the data are owned. That is why architecture is not a technical afterthought in this strategy. It is where competitive advantage is either protected or quietly given away. A boundary that lives only in a policy document is a wish. The same boundary built into the architecture is a fact. And because the frontier keeps moving, strategy here cannot be a fixed bet. Under genuine uncertainty, you do not wager everything on a forecast. You take positions that survive being wrong. You commit to the direction and stay flexible on the route. You favor no regret moves, the investments that pay off across many futures, owned data, clean integration, real governance, skilled people, and you buy optionality, the ability to act later without paying the full price of being wrong today. Because the real exposure of an agentic system is not only financial, it is legal, it is reputational, and it is operational. The financial exposure is the one that fits on a slide. It is often the smallest of the four. That is the strategy. Now let me turn to the harder half, which is transformation. Because here is the uncomfortable truth that the demonstrations hide. A pilot proves that an agent can work. Production proves that the enterprise can rely on it. Those are completely different achievements, and most value is lost in the distance between them. It is not lost in the laboratory, and it is not lost in the market. It is lost in the crossing. There is a chasm between a system that impressed a steering committee and a system the business actually runs on, and many programs never cross it. Crossing it requires what I call a production gate. Production is not a date the calendar reaches. It is a standard The agent has to pass. Can we observe what it does? Can we constrain what it is allowed to do? Can we stop it, contain it, and recover when it goes wrong? Can we show after the fact what it did and why? An enterprise that defines that gate once and holds every agent to it builds something far more valuable than any single agent. It builds the ability to deploy the next one cheaply and safely. And that is the real meaning of scale. Scale is the most misunderstood word in this whole subject. Scale is not more agents. One dependable agent is an achievement. An enterprise that can produce the next dependable agent and the 100th at low cost and with consistent control has a capability. Scale is the machinery that makes each new agent routine, the shared way of building, the common controls, the reusable patterns, the inventory of what is running and who owns it. Anyone can run a pilot. Far fewer can run an agent factory. But transformation is not only about systems, it is about work and about people, and this is where leaders are tested. Agentic AI does not simply remove tasks, it redesigns roles. The customer service officer becomes an exception handler dealing with the cases the agent escalates. The finance analyst becomes a reviewer of explanations the agent has drafted. The engineer becomes an orchestrator of agents rather than the author of every line. The manager spends less time chasing status and more time exercising judgment. This is not a footnote to the strategy, it is the strategy, because a capability that the workforce does not trust will not be used, and a capability the workforce trusts blindly will not be checked. Both of those failures are expensive. So the workforce transition has to be designed deliberately, not left to happen on its own, which means being honest about what changes, rebuilding the way people learn the judgment that the machine now hides, and protecting the human work that must stay human. Because some things do not delegate. Accountability does not delegate. The contested judgment call does not delegate. The relationship with the customer in the moment that matters does not delegate. And as these systems multiply, a new discipline appears, which is operating them together. A single agent completes a task. An enterprise operation has to make many agents work together, keep the work visible, and keep the service running when conditions change. This is orchestration, and it is closer to running a factory floor than running a chatbot. You need to see the work while it happens, not only read about it afterwards. You need to know which way the operation fails and to make it fail safely. A collection of capable agents is not yet an operation. Orchestration is what turns capability into something an enterprise can actually depend on. Now, let me give you a practical instrument that ties strategy and transformation together, because the executives ask me for one. It is the question of autonomy, and it is best understood as a ladder. At the first level, the agent suggests and a human acts. At the second, the agent drafts and a human approves. At the third, the agent executes low-risk actions within defined limits. At the fourth, it executes more complex actions with monitoring and exception handling. And at the fifth, it operates autonomously inside a tightly governed domain. The mistake is to believe the goal is always level 5. It is not. The goal is to place each piece of work at the right level for its consequence. An agent may safely summarize a policy at level 5 and still correctly be held at level 2 before it releases a payment, terminates an employee, or makes a clinical recommendation. Maturity is not maximum autonomy. Maturity is matching autonomy to consequence on purpose. Let me make this concrete with a single example, the kind of situation I have lived through. Picture a bank that moves money across borders. Payments arrive at all hours in many currencies under the rules of many regulators. Some clear in seconds, others stop, held for a sanctions check, a data mismatch, a value that breaches a limit. The strategy choice comes first. The bank does not ask, where can we put an agent? It asks which capability should change, and it picks one. The handling of held payments, a real capability, not a task, and one where speed, consistency, and risk reduction all live at once. Then the work is designed against the production gate. Before any payment is released by a system, leadership asks the 4 questions. Can we see what the agent does on every case? Can we constrain what it is allowed to touch? Can we stop it and recover a payment that should not have gone? Can we show a regulator afterward exactly what happened and why? Until the answer to all 4 is yes, the agent does not cross into production. The demonstration was never the milestone. The gate is. Then the autonomy ladder is applied, case by case, according to consequence. A low value hold with a clean history, the agent clears on its own, level 5, and the queue moves faster than it ever did. A data mismatch, the agent prepares the correction and a person approves, level 2. Anything touching a sanctions concern never leaves a human's hands at all. Same capability. 3 different levels of autonomy, each matched to what is at stake. That is the whole argument in one operation. A capability chosen on purpose. A gate that earns trust. Autonomy placed where the consequence allows it, and withheld where it does not. The work is carried by the system. The answer for it stays with the bank. Let me ground this in what the evidence is already showing, because the pattern is hard to miss. Gartner expects that more than 40% of agentic AI projects will be cancelled before they mature, undone by runaway cost, unclear value, or weak risk controls. The same analysts warn of what they call agent washing, where a large share of so-called agentic products are ordinary automation in new packaging, with only a small fraction offering genuine autonomy. McKinsey's enterprise research tells the other half of the story. A growing number of firms are experimenting with agents, but only a minority have scaled them, and only about a third report mature governance for the ones they run. And Deloitte finds that agentic AI is scaling faster than the guardrails around it, with roughly 1 enterprise in 5 reporting a mature model for governing autonomous agents. Read together, these are not arguments against agentic AI. They are a precise description of the gap between adoption and value. And that gap is exactly where leadership earns its keep. The enterprises that close it will not be the ones that moved first. They will be the ones that move deliberately. And none of this earns its place without value, so let me be precise about value. Many programs fail because they measure activity instead of impact. They count pilots launched, users onboarded, prompts submitted, documents generated. Those are operating metrics. They are not return. Return shows up in a small number of honest categories. Productivity, the effort genuinely removed. Cycle time, the process that genuinely moves faster. Quality, the errors genuinely avoided and the consistency genuinely improved. Revenue, the opportunities genuinely captured. And risk reduction, the failure genuinely prevented, the fraud caught earlier, the breach escalated faster. That last category matters more than it is given credit for. Not all value is cost saved. Sometimes the value is a failure that never happened. The discipline is simple to state and hard to hold. No agent without a value hypothesis, no pilot without a success metric, no scaling without proof of business impact. So let me bring this together for the people who actually carry the accountability. If you sit on a board or an executive team, agentic AI puts a specific set of questions in front of you, and your readiness is measured by whether you can answer them. Which business capabilities should become agent-enabled and which should not? Where is autonomy acceptable? And where is human judgment mandatory? What value are we actually measuring and against what baseline? What risks are we knowingly accepting, and what controls must exist before we scale? Which sourcing and architecture choices protect our flexibility for the long term, and how will the work and the workforce be redesigned around this? If a leadership team cannot answer those questions, it is not ready to scale. It may continue to experiment, and it should. But it should not mistake experimentation for transformation. Much of what I have walked through today, I have set down at length in a book. It is called The Agentic Enterprise, and it holds strategy, transformation, and governance together as one discipline, the way the work actually arrives, rather than as three separate conversations. It joins two earlier books in the Building with Claude series on building and engineering with the systems. If it is useful to you, the details are on the screen. Let me leave you with the heart of it. The winners in this shift will not be the enterprises with the most agents. They will be the enterprises that know where agents matter and where they do not, that can govern them, measure them, and redesign work around them without losing control of what those systems do in their name. Because the prize here is a particular combination, and it is a difficult one. Speed with control, autonomy with accountability, intelligence with trust. The work can be delegated to these systems. The answer for that work cannot. An enterprise that holds those two truths together, that lets its systems act while remaining able to answer for everything they do, is what I mean by an agentic enterprise. That is not a technology achievement, it is a leadership achievement. And the question in front of every leader is not whether agentic AI will reshape the enterprise. It will. The real question is whether you will shape that change deliberately or allow disconnected tools, vendors, and experiments to shape it for you. Thank you.